Back in 2014, I was getting married, and we had a celebration with a small group of people set up in Orlando, Florida, and kind of pulling out all the stops to make it the best event that we could on all aspects: food, decorations, and of course, music. Well, when it came to hiring a musician, live music really seemed like the way to go. So I jumped online and I checked out a website called gigsalad.com. They still exist. You can hire all musicians of all sorts, all genres, all instruments of all types for all and any event across the United States. And I'm not sure if Canada is there either, but pretty wide berth of musicians on Gig Salad. Started looking at guitarists. I mean, that was what I thought would be a really cool idea. Single guitarist. Classical music is both my wife and I's love, and then of course some jazz and some standards. And ran into David Naidu, and immediately liked what I heard from his samples. It was a clean delivery, nylon acoustic fingerstyle playing, instrumentals. His menu of songs you could choose from for any event was vast, very diverse. There was Bach, there was the Bee Gees. Those, by chance, are two of the songs that I chose. And when I showed up for the ceremony that day, David was on time. He quietly sat up in the corner while everyone was milling about, saying their hellos and getting ready for the big event. And it was immaculate. He was just in the background enough for everybody to enjoy and not right up in front and in your face. And he performed a great show. And, you know, even though the weight of the day was the gravitas was in the forefront of my mind, there was a part of me that wanted to stop and walk over and talk shop with this guy, being a guitarist myself. And, you know, we shook hands and exchanged niceties to the extent of a guy hiring a musician for an event. And we briefly kept in touch afterwards. He sent me a copy of his new CD, Going Places, that he had just released that year, and full of amazing tunes. Well, anyway, when I was tracking down musicians to have on my show, David Naidu popped up in the forefront of my mind, and he was very generous with his time and jumped at the chance to have an interview. So, without further ado, David Naidu from Orlando, Florida. Enjoy.
I am. How's it going? Long time.
It has been. It's been literally, we got married in 2014.
I thought it was even longer ago.
So it feels like it.
Yeah, it's been about 10 years then.
It has. It has. And and in 2014, you also released your recording Going Places. I noticed the date on it. Yeah.
Okay. All right. It's coming back to me slowly. I don't know about how much longer I can take Orlando.
And for what reason is that?
Oh, I don't know. It's just very since I think music in general is dominated by Walt Disney and Universal and tourist things, so it tends to be kind of superficial. I mean, things have slowly changed a little bit for the better because of the Dr. Phillips Performing Arts Center.
Oh,
I don't.
nice.
Yeah, I don't know if you realize, but in the past, I moved to Florida about 21 years ago, and in Central Florida, whenever somebody big came by, like Paul McCartney or Paul Simon or something, you would have to go either to Tampa or Jacksonville or Miami. In that area, there was nothing in Central Florida. But
Interesting.
the Dr. Phillips Performing Arts Center opened up a few years ago, and they have 3 amazing concert venues where
Oh,
I'm going
nice.
to go weeks to see Pat Metheny for.
Oh, I am a huge Pat Metheny fan. I've seen him a couple times as well, and every time I've gone, it's just been a soothing experience and a cleansing of the soul. He's such an amazing performer.
I ditto, I'll say, well, I'm a bigger Pat Metheny fan, and I realize now that he's got the kind of following that no one can claim to be the biggest, because there's people out there that have seen him 30 times, have been following him since the beginning.
Right?
And yes, but I learned over the years that never to doubt whether it's going to be great or not. I mean, everyone is also very different. I've seen him
Very
so
true.
in a trio. I've seen him with 10 people on stage, all different lineups, and yes, it's always been an experience, a great experience. So yeah, the first time I saw him was when I was studying music in college in New Brunswick, New Jersey, at Rutgers,
Nice.
and I didn't really know him at all, and I just and it was funny because my first couple of years in college there, people were saying, yeah, Pat Metheny, you got to check him out, because I wasn't really a jazz guy. I was always rock, classical, and everything, but the jazz, it just never really hit me. I always respected it, but I didn't really get into it. And I kick myself now, because about halfway through my college years, then I learned about him and just loved his music. And then very late notice at the State Theater there, they said he's coming by. And I said, oh my God, I didn't get any tickets or anything. So I just kind of, on really short notice, I showed up, and 10 minutes to 8 o'clock, I just asked at the box office outside on the street there, says, there any tickets left? I'll take anything. Yeah, we have 1 ticket left. 5 minutes before, grab the ticket. It was like 5th row, right in front of them. 3 minutes, the lights went down, and this was the tour for Letter from Home. Yes, so it had some that have passed away, like Lyle Mays and and so it had to hold the kind of the Brazilian band, Steve Rodby on bass, and Paul Wertico on drums and everything. And I said, I just can't get any better than that. And ever since then, I've been following him. And yes, it can get not necessarily better, but yes,
different. Yeah.
Yes. So
I had a chance to see him. This is his Dreambox tour, so I think it's just him on stage.
I believe so. Yes.
Yeah. And for a guitarist like yourself who plays solo, that'll be nice to witness and be a part of, for sure.
Absolutely. He's great any way you see him, whatever instruments he picks, whatever. It's really an experience. No.
Did you see him did you get a chance to catch him during his tour with his instrumental machine behind him?
I was just thinking about that 15 seconds ago. I didn't catch that. He didn't come to the area. Dr. Phillips Center was not open, and I eyed him up, up in Jacksonville and far away. I wish, but I did not catch that one. Did you see it?
No, I did not, and I would not blame him for only doing a handful of shows with that device.
Right?
It must have been a nightmare.
It's a funny thing, is because about after I got out of college and I started my own audio video business, I had an opportunity to see him in a trio setting in the Theater for the Living Arts in Philadelphia, because I was mid between New York City and Philadelphia. And I still wasn't really a jazz guy like I am now. And so I'd say, oh, it's a trio. It's Dave Holland on upright bass and Roy Haynes on a little drum set. And I go in thinking, oh, he's going to be good. It's not going to be bad. So, but it's not really my thing, Ornette Coleman and Coltrane. And it's like really it's far out. It's not your, jazz standards. It's kind of the out there, like real jazz. And I tell you, I went and saw it, and it was, again, just so amazing. Yeah. It was absolutely mind-blowing. And in addition to his compositions and his playing and everything like that, he's really a master. Like you were mentioning, the machine, the orchestra robots, whatever we want to call that.
Yeah. What was that called?
I
Or
don't know.
orchestranium or something to that effect. There was a name for that gizmo.
I saw a special like on CBS Sunday Morning or something, and it showed the inventor of all these different devices, and it was like behind the
Yeah,
20-minute segment. I should look back into that because, but he's the
the
type of
the orchestrion.
okay, yes,
Yeah.
yeah, that's something else. And even though that was just him solo, but later on he like brought some of his machines with him because I saw him with a different lineup at the House of Blues for This
Hmm.
Way Up, and I
Hmm.
saw a couple of them, and just
Yeah.
he had a medium-sized band. This is when he had the trumpet player with him, Kwang Vu, and a different piano, an Asian piano player that I wasn't familiar with. But
Hmm.
he's the again, I would never ever question, like sometimes he comes up with a new album and a new lineup, and sometimes I'll say, oh, why do we have a trumpet player or a saxophone? And it always turns out to be great. You never have to question his ability to recruit people. He's never going to pick anyone that's less than stellar. Has been my
Absolutely, absolutely. And the lineup I saw was after that, and he had Sanchez on drums, which was, oh my God, what a phenomenal rhythm
oh
machine.
God, I am the biggest fan of him. Yes, I love drummers in general, just drumming. I mean, people
Oh,
sometimes, oh, you're a classical guitarist and everything. You're probably not. No, I'm really up on all the best drummers. And to me, he's one of the very best. It's amazing.
so
Just
since then, since Rutgers, have you converted to a jazz guy? Is that your prime go-to music now for guitar music, or?
no, I'm still doing what I've been doing. I'm just expanding and diversifying, and just I get into every kind of style out there. And I think in some ways it's good, and sometimes I think it's bad because I'm so spread out. But yeah, I like all different types of music and all different styles of guitar. So yes, it's.
Absolutely,
I mean, even in the jazz world, there's such a variety of players. I mean, it's that kind of
absolutely.
fusion. There's your traditional jazz players. Uh, I mean, like right now, I just love. I guess you probably follow Julian Lage.
Oh, amazing! Love him.
Yes, absolutely fan. So I love that Americana kind of sound,
Hmm.
traditional jazz, but he does. Of course, he does traditional as well, but he does that kind of Americana, like Bill. Have you heard, I saw like something on YouTube with him playing with Bill Frisell. That kind of reminds me of that.
Exactly,
Very
exactly.
evocative, kind of Western sound, which I love too. Yeah.
Little nuances of folk and country trickling in, but with
That,
a nice jazz foundation. Yeah,
yeah.
Julian, they make me want to pick up a Telecaster.
Exactly. Yes. And I've been eyeing Telecasters because I know I have to have them. I mean, it's ridiculous. I've been playing for over 45 years, and I've never. I have a Telecaster, but it's not a traditional kind. It's the Richie Kotzen model, which has a little humbucker and things in it. But no, I want to get a real, like a no-caster or something really. And believe it or not, I'm almost contemplating getting one with a B bender in it.
Oh wow, that'd be interesting.
Yes, I just think it would be really cool to have.
Yeah, it would get kind of that slide, that kind of effect, right?
Yes,
Yeah,
yeah. I mean, some people can, the real country players, which I am not, they can kind
right.
of emulate it with just their fingers and do a good
Sure,
job, like
sure.
Brent Mason and people like that. But uh, to have it, there's just certain sounds, and you even hear it in rock music, like on Led Zeppelin, "All of My Love," and some Metallica. You'll hear that sound, and yep, that's it. That kind of, yeah, it's a
That's how
great,
they do.
yeah.
Well, David, what is your you're a musician that does a lot of different gigs in the Orlando area. Case in point, you did our wedding. You had an amazing set list to choose from. I got to pick and choose what tunes. I love that. You had a whole menu of and it was
Yeah.
diverse. I picked a Bee Gees song. I picked some traditional,
Mhm.
classical Bach tunes. And your performance, and I hate to say it because it was one of the most important days of my life, but my ear kept gravitating. What's the guy in the corner doing? Like, oh wow, I didn't expect the Bee Gees to sound so good. And
That's
so,
rare for me.
what is?
For somebody that's really into guitar, that's a guitarist themselves, and to because usually it's to just provide atmosphere, and I'm fine with it as a job, and people enjoy music. I don't judge. People enjoy music in different ways, but for you to enjoy it, it sounds like similarly to the way I enjoy it. That's great.
And I knew hiring you that it was going to be okay. I'm going to definitely walk in. I'm going to see this amazing guitarist. I'm going to see a guitar. I'm going to want to talk shop with the guy, but I'm getting married, so that'll have to. But so you're being of all sorts of styles. Do you have just one go-to guitar that you take with you, one go-to setup, or could your gig involve a Telecaster if need be, or you know?
Well, right now I only use electric guitar when I'm in a band setting. I'm in a band at a church that's down the road, uh, and that really got me used to playing with other people because I have been a soloist for so much of my life, but I love playing with other people. But these days it's just difficult to get more than a couple people in the same room and get that together. So I have a go-to when I'm doing solo gigs, and that's going to be generally my classical guitar, which I just recently, in the last year or two, got a really great performance classical guitar. And with all the different styles and all the gizmos that I have a lot of electronic. I'm sure you know about gear acquisition syndrome. Some
Yes, absolutely.
cars, some people collect a lot of the little devices, the pedals and process to do different things, guitar synthesizers, and sometimes you get a little bit carried away with it, and I'm definitely guilty of that. And I'm trying to redeem myself because it becomes to a point where you spend so much time on YouTube looking at different devices and demos and buying and selling and wiring and programming it. Now the devices for playing electric guitar, they have processors. You have to be a bit of a computer nerd.
Absolutely.
and of course I've worked with computers, and I'm not bad. I can do things, but I'm telling you, these new devices and the younger kids now, I no longer feel as competent on computers as I thought it was.
It's interesting. And it seems like it's almost like knowing a new vocabulary. You can know the vocabulary of the instrument, you can know the vocabulary of music, but suddenly there's this off branching, like you said, the new generation are learning the vocabulary of technology and how to, and which is really, I think, maybe a good turn because one, guitar needed a kick in the pants as a refresher. And for another, I think it might attract a large younger audience towards the instrument to see, you know what, there are new possibilities of taking it where it hasn't gone before. And I think I want to try that.
Yes, exactly. So
Yeah.
there's been a lot of different trends, and one of them is looping, right? The loopers.
There you
Now,
go.
all
Yeah.
these people that are doing a one-man band and looping and programming, things like that. And after all these years, I am in the process right now, as of a few weeks ago, embarking on giving that a real go at. Is the whole one-man band. If anyone can do it, you would think it would be the classical guitar players that's used to playing multiple parts, bass parts, and things all within the one instrument. And there's a lot of other people doing this, and I keep on saying to myself, why aren't I doing that? Well, I like playing with other musicians, but really
Mhm.
things changed so much with the whole COVID. The pandemic changed
Mhm.
everything. So
Oh, no doubt.
yes, so I took a little break up until last month, actually. Not a
Mhm.
music in that I love playing, and I was just as enthusiastic and serious about it. But as far as teaching and performing gigs, it absolutely evaporated to zero.
Wow.
And so I was teaching in very upscale neighborhoods in Windermere, Florida. I would go and drive to their homes and teach these kids and get paid quite well. And then I would have gigs on the weekend and do things at restaurants and things like that. And then I
Mm-hmm.
a part-time job at a medical office because most people don't hire musicians on a Monday morning during the weekdays. So it's an evening weekend kind of work.
Sure.
So I was kind of thankful because then when after the shutdown happened, I went full time to working in a medical office, which I mean, I wasn't miserable, but I want to play music. So as soon as I got home, I was like, all right, I'm gonna hit my guitar and everything. But students were gone. I mean, when it first started, I tried the whole Zoom thing and the
Mm-hmm.
and the delay to play at the same time with the duet and everything. It did. I'm sure things have improved, and I suppose if I really put my efforts and time into it, I can make it work. I'm gonna see, because now it seems everybody's gone online. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
some have adapted very well. I mean, this is a fairly new thing. Is the whole not right now? YouTube is most that they're the teachers right there. They're online. And let's face it, so much is available free. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
the music industry in general has really changed in that way. I mean, the whole AI thing.
Yeah.
It is kind of scary. I'm probably not going to be around when it really starts, but I always find it funny because we look at we look at science fiction movies and we see various technology and we kind of almost laugh at it and say, oh, that's
Mm-hmm.
but can you imagine? I remember being a kid and we were looking at Captain Kirk, he's picking up his communicator and like, look at this. He's talking to somebody on the other side of the planet with this little device. And now we have cell phones, video,
Yeah.
audio, and all these apps and everything.
Guitar Garage Talk is brought to you by YourGuitarMechanic.com. Setups, repairs, restrings, and more. Whatever your guitar or bass needs, we can get it done. Offering pickup and delivery service in the greater Charlotte, North Carolina area. YourGuitarMechanic.com. Now, back to the program.
David, I have to ask, when you we were just talking about electronics and how the single musician uh, becomes a full band with just a few pedals and a looper, and
Yes.
buskers are in a whole new world now.
Mm-hmm.
Musicians like yourself will have much more capabilities at a live gig. When you went to the studio to do your album in 2014, did you were the enhancements done on the board with a bit of reverb here and some gate, et cetera, or did you have pedals? How did you approach that?
Well, that was my real first experience it's a small studio and I didn't really know the process very well. I've always been an enthusiast for audio equipment and recording and things like that. So I knew a little bit. But the modern way of doing it now, again, computers have taken over. So no longer do we have the big mixing console and the reel-to-reel tapes and the splicing, and it's all done on a computer with
Mm-hmm.
for the most part is the industry's.
Mm-hmm.
So when I was doing these pieces, I almost first really rebelled against having a click track. So I'm in the headphones. I'm like, well, the kind of music I play is not metronomic, but that these days, the people that do recordings and modern, everything is Pro Tools with click tracks, and the amount of fixing that you can do is incredible.
Mm-hmm.
I did very little fixing because I like the sound of it being live, but but yes, it is an amazing thing that if there's a little fret squeak or one note kind of buzzes, I could seamlessly go in and listen to the track, and then just for that split second, play the note multiple times until I didn't need to do too much of that. But if every time you made a little glitch and you had to redo it till you get it perfect, it may never get done.
Mm-hmm.
People will say, well, let's leave it in. That's part of the charm. So I don't know the answer to that. That's kind of an ongoing debate, right? The spontaneity. But even back in the famous recordings and albums of the 60s and the 70s and everything, they did mostly live in the studio, but they did quite a bit of overdubbing and doing them in different times. I think the big thing now is it's amazing how bands can make an album without ever being in the same room at all. True. That they send the digital file over and a producer can just combine it all.
Right.
And this isn't just for recording either, for live music. It's a lot of the old classic bands that are up there in age, that are doing reunion tours and things. You're seeing on YouTube reviews and people complaining because they're using backing tracks.
Right.
And it's one thing if it's like an orchestral background or something that requires a huge thing. But now we're seeing that people that have had careers for decades and now are getting up there and they can't play as well and they can't sing as well, that they're filling up stadiums on stage, huge show production, and they're not singing or playing. Right. And they're playing the backing tracks.
Yeah.
And to the untrained eye, a lot of them, they don't even know. I mean, people were talking about the Super Bowl, about how much of it is actually them playing. And they said, well, it's live. They cannot afford to have any glitches of a guitar chord shorting out or anything.
Right.
It's to be all pre-recorded pretty much. So,
right.
Yeah, so I don't know.
And I hate being a guitarist because I was watching her at the halftime show.
Yeah.
She pulls out her signature Strat, and I was just ogling it like a kid in a candy store.
Right.
And then I noticed that she was overdubbing, and I went, "Wait, geez, that ruins the whole thing."
And then you can also see the ones that are really good can fake it really good too. But even then, you can notice something.
And I think that's why guys like you and I gravitate towards Metheny, because he brings that organic realism to the stage. And every time you see him, no song will sound the same from performance to performance. And that's what makes his show so good. You never know what you're going to get.
Yes. And he has the chops. He is so good that,
yeah.
Do you ever hear him playing a wrong note? I mean, in his mind, he's so advanced that I'm sure many times he says, well, this passage and this there, I flubbed this or that. But to us, it'll be so minute that it's fine. Yes.
David, I also noticed, so when you went into the studio for your recording, and I'm looking at it on Spotify, it's going places. It was all you in the studio, except one tune features a singer, Jaslyn Breton, yes, Breton, Jaslyn Breton. Is she from the area? And how did you find her? How did you connect with her?
She was one of my guitar students. She was quite advanced with her singing, but she wanted to learn guitar to accompany. And as a student, she sometimes would sing. And I said, you have a really good voice. I have a song. Maybe I'll have one vocal track on it. So I asked her to, and I brought her in, and I kind of like it, having it just something a little different. So, yeah, that's
very nice. Did you record it live with her, or was that her pressing in vocals afterwards?
She did it to the track. So everything was recorded, and she just laid down the tracks and did a couple takes, and that was it.
Awesome. It's a great recording. I love it. It's fingerstyle guitar, and it's a beautiful music. Absolutely. I have it in my rotation, my mellow workday rotation mix that Is that your go-to guitar behind you?
Yes, this is my latest classical guitar. Now this is all I play. It's just a fantastic instrument. I don't know how well.
What brand is that, and where did you find it?
This I got during the pandemic and I saw it on Reverb and eBay. And this is it's an English maker, David Rouse, and it is modeled after a Hauser. And the difference between the guitar that's on the recording that I was playing with for many years is profound. It's just so much richer and powerful and clean.
What gauge strings do you use? Do you have a particular brand that you go to?
They don't go classical guitar strings. They don't use gauge. They call them. They have different ratings of tension: medium tension, hard tension, light tension. So I use kind of a medium one. I believe it responds better when it's not really hard tension, and I don't want it light so that it breaks up if you play it dynamically. So I medium, and I'm very particular about strings. It makes a huge difference to me, and I get ones that are made in France, Savarez, and I constantly try different ones from time to time, and now I never do, because every time I try something else, I go back.
When you set up at a gig, an event like a wedding, and I don't remember, did you have a microphone positioned in front of you, or do you have a pickup in there?
Well, I do have an electric nylon string guitar. It doesn't have acoustics. Without any amplification, it's almost inaudible. But it's fine for it. It's a Godin, it's a Canadian brand. I don't know if you're familiar with them, but
I love Godin electric guitars. They're gorgeous.
Yes, so they're very famous for having acoustic and classical nylon strung guitars that have the RMC pickups on them that are also used for. They have a 13-pin output that can be hooked up to a synthesizer. I tried that for a little while. The Roland, yes, so you can do things that sound a little bit like Pat Metheny on it. Not, but yeah, that's what I would use if it's a very noisy environment. I'm trying to remember what I used. I think for yours, I used a regular classical guitar with a microphone. Yes,
that's what I believe I remember. Yeah.
Yes, I think so. Yes.
Are there any Metheny tunes that you dive into and try and any techniques that you've taken from Pat, or?
I wish I could say yes. I tried a little bit. I do have an arrangement of Letter from Home. Boy, was it difficult. They put all the parts and the harmonies and the bass and the stretches are hard. And they make it because you're kind of trying to emulate Lyle Mays on piano, the accompaniment and the main melody. But yes, and there are some arrangers out there. I don't know if you're familiar with Jason Vio. No, he's a big, very well-known in the classical guitar world. He's very known. He's a professor of guitar in the Cleveland Music Institute, and he has an album called Images of Pat Metheny, and they're all his music arranged for classical guitar.
Very nice. One of my favorite Pat tunes was James, and I recently had Spotify shooting a jazz mix at me, and this harpist came up with a classical harp, and she did a version of James that just blew my mind. Come to find out, Pat actually plays on that track with her. Her name is Katrin Finch, Catrin Finch. Katrin Finch, and Pat Metheny helps her out on that track. It's a really great tune.
Okay.
Yeah, really great rendition, and the things she does with that harp are just mind-blowing. You mentioned Rutgers, and you mentioned New Jersey. Is that where you're originally from?
I've been around, but I would say before I moved to Florida, I lived in New Jersey for a good 20, 25 years. And that's where I had a an audio video store that actually and had CDs. Remember those?
Oh yeah.
I had tens of thousands of CDs in the store, and then another section was high-end audio video equipment. And it was really during the infancy. Back then, the internet was just starting,
Sure.
so you can buy it, all of it. So people used to come in and they would browse through all the CDs, and they would buy a stack of CDs every week or two.
Sure.
And now, if I were to tell somebody that was my business, they would like, "What's that?" I do Spotify. I do streaming, but then people bought CDs, and it was all the craze.
I saw a cartoon the other day on Facebook. It's these two little kids on the floor of the living room sitting in front of Grandpa in a rocking chair, and they say, "Grandpa, tell us about the days where you used to buy a whole record album for just one song."
That's right. Now they're digital files. You don't actually have anything in your hands to show for it.
Guitar Garage Talk is brought to you by YourGuitarMechanic.com. Setups, repairs, restrings, and more. Whatever your guitar or bass needs, we can get it done. Offering pickup and delivery service in the greater Charlotte, North Carolina area. YourGuitarMechanic.com. Now, back to the program.
When did you make that shift? Well, I guess you picked up the guitar way before you were into audiovisual.
Yeah.
How did your journey with the guitar start?
It started when my mother brought me to a flamenco guitarist named Diego Corriente. I was 8 years old, and she bought me a little classical guitar. I still have it. It's deteriorated a lot over 50 years. and that's where I learned classical guitar. I learned how to read music, and I'd go there every week. And I've been completely into taking music lessons for all of my youth, even in my teenage years, college, even afterwards. Finding good teachers was always very important to me. I even took lessons when I moved to Florida and master classes as well. I don't know if you're familiar with what was then the Stetson University in DeLand. They had a guitar workshop every summer, and they would bring in the top players from all over the world. It became huge, and real top players would perform concerts, and they would give master classes. So I've probably taken close to 100 master classes from various people when I go and see their concerts. Many times the afternoon before the concert, they'll say, if you want to take a master class, sign up. And so I've done a lot of that as well. And this is when I lived in Long Island. That's when I started with the classical. And then as a teenager, then I got into electric guitar. It was the late 70s and the classic rock. And I remember going to a jazz player. He had a Jazz Master and a big Fender amp, a Bassman with two 15s in it. And then back then, we would sit down and he would teach us Led Zeppelin and Aerosmith songs, and he'd write them out in tablature right in front of us. And he had a reel-to-reel, and he would slow it down to half speed. And so he's teaching me the solo to like "Don't Fear the Reaper" from Blue Oyster
Nice.
Cult,
Sure.
And
it's funny, David. It's interesting. I see with my business here working on guitars, I see a lot of young players bringing their guitars in. And one of the, when we start talking about learning music and such, I've asked every one of them, do you read tablature? And none of them know how to read tablature notation. They know what it is. I know. And I think the same way as you. My head cocks to the side and I go, are you kidding me? Because your whole world will blow up. You don't need to. I'm not advocating not learning music theory.
Well,
yeah, but if you learn notation, tablature notation, your world of playing is going to explode, and music measures and music terminology will get that much closer to your vocabulary.
Yes, I'm really surprised to learn that, because I thought you were going to say that so few people know how to, especially guitarists, know how to read music. Because if you don't learn classical, I mean, learning blues and rock, reading standard notation is just not done. But tablature, how can you not know how to read it? There's nothing to read. It's
You
not,
know, that's
it's a
very true.
number on a string.
Yeah.
So it's very limited, and I'm not knocking it because it's better than nothing for sure. I think, but I I read a lot of biographies from really great players,
Mhm.
and back when there weren't computers and the internet and everything and tablature, and the big thing was that they would drop a needle on a record, or their ears. Exactly, ear training has really gone out, but just people don't train their ears. They want, I guess it's the way things are now. They want immediate gratification. So rather than sitting there and listening to it over and over, slowing it down, which now is so much easier with computer technology, I have programs that you can change the speed to any tempo you like without changing the pitch, or change the pitch either one independently. And it's amazing. Put them in loops for training and practicing. You can take a 5-second excerpt or something really difficult, and you can make it go 50%, 55%, 60, and slowly go up in increments. And by the time you're 100% on loop number 12, you get it.
Yeah. It's almost like it kind of reminds me of if you sat down a kid today at a typewriter, they'd have no freaking clue what they're looking at.
That's right.
So when you were doing rock guitar in those lessons in Long Island, did you say?
Yes.
Who, when you picked up a rock guitar, being more classical and jazz that you are now, who back then when you were a kid in the late 70s, who was sparking your interest in electric rock guitar?
Oh, back then it was because of Led Zeppelin and Aerosmith and Foghat and Pat Travers and Boston. And I remember like being a 12-year-old, and I had a birthday party, and the standard gift would be to bring a record. And one guy brought over a record of Lynyrd Skynyrd's Street Survivors that had just come out. I remember we'd have a listening lunch. During lunch, people would bring in their records to put on the phonograph. This was like when I was in 5th grade, 6th grade, and I brought in Frampton Comes Alive, and the double album opened up, and Kiss Alive too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Some girl had opened up the record, and one of the records fell out, and it cracked. And
that's funny.
And look at the covers and everything.
Yeah. I love that you mentioned Pat Travers, because he really falls into the shadows of some of the biggies that are out there. And Pat Travers is a very accomplished blues rock.
Yeah, like Frank Marino, Pat Travers, Foghat.
David, when did your tastes shift from rock? Well, I mean, you talked about jazz vocabularies. You started growing an appreciation for jazz. Was it fusion rock? Was it Chick Corea? Was it Pat Metheny? Was it those guys that kind of jazz and rock and John McLaughlin and when they start segueing? Well, in my book, it was Carlos Santana. His instrumental stuff was beyond rock, and it was and then suddenly with Carlos, I started discovering John McLaughlin. And then John McLaughlin led to Chick Corea and Frank Gambale. And suddenly there's this whole world of guitarists out there that are tipping their toe in rock. But suddenly you're shifting to jazz. Who shifted you into that jazz? And then in that case, maybe even classical music. When did your tastes start to migrate, and who was it that migrated you?
That's the thing. I was always, and growing up, I was always the youngest. So a lot of older people, they would talk of these names that now I love. And back then I was a dumb kid, and I never really got into it. So all of this really was after high school, college, and everything like that. Before that, I had my classical guitar, and I was into classic rock. It really wasn't until my adult life that I really started expanding to all different kinds of music, and that's largely because of the internet, because it's the window to everything. I mean, I can just get lost. You know, you look up something on YouTube, and next thing you know it, you're seeing something on the side column suggests this, and you just go down this rabbit hole. It's amazing. I as an older person, I mean, there's things I can complain about. I know a lot of people of my age will say, "Oh no, there's no good music out there."
Yeah.
There's amazing musicians out there. They're just completely unknown unless you just happen to see them on YouTube and through the internet. You know, there's amazing musicians and all over the world. And I think that's a major game changer, is that now we have access. So, and hopefully younger people, and I think they are to a certain point, are not limited to just one thing, just pop or EDM or rock or anything, that they do see, you know, that there are other styles out there, and it's so accessible. They don't have to necessarily invest. Like you mentioned, Pat Travers, for example. I had no idea who he was. I looked at the album cover. He was in a record executive's office for the album cover, Putting It Straight.
Okay.
And I saw him there with all this, and it just looked really cool. And it turned out to be great. It was just fantastic.
Well, and you know, and in the world of algorithms now, when I log into Spotify and suddenly I'm listening to an hour of Kenny Burrell, suddenly your algorithm will be like, well, how about more West Montgomery? Or, hey, have you heard Julian Lage? Or I discovered a guy recently who showed up in a jazz playlist that I picked at random, and he definitely comes from the school of Pat Metheny. And his guitar playing is insanely good, but he's from the Netherlands. I've never heard of the guy. And thanks to technology today, you know, those kind of guys get their albums on Spotify and Apple Music, and they get discovered.
Yeah,
know?
there's no shortage of great musicians. There's no question about that. And it's not that there aren't tons of great musicians in the U.S., but now I'm noticing just how great the music scene is out in Europe and in Asia. Just amazing players. Just things you just, yeah. So,
David, have you your songs on your album Going Places? They're all originals.
They're none of them are original. They're all.
I don't recognize any of the titles. So where are they coming from?
It's contemporary classical guitar. So now the classical guitar world it's not like the days in the 60s and the 70s where Segovia basically brought classical music to the guitar medium. Of course, there's great reverence to that, and people that play, the top players that play the traditional war horses, as they say, Bach and names that maybe you don't even know, Soar, Giuliani. These are huge.
Paganini.
Yes. So they're still there and people play it, but a lot of these virtuoso classical guitar players, they're taking modern music, popular songs, it might be Celtic music, Irish, Celtic jigs and things like that, but done on a classical guitar where it's so now, so all that is, that's why I almost don't like using the word classical guitar. I prefer nylon string guitar. What you play on, classical is the style. The guitar is nylon string, which is what separates it. You use your fingers and you use nylon strings. And that's the sound that you can only get from knowing that technique. And so as much as I love all styles of music and all my different guitars and all my different gadgets with reverbs and delays and things like that, the one thing I'm always drawn to and always gives me solace is my classical guitar. It's my mind, it's my fingers, and it's the piece of wood and the strings vibrating. And there's a purity to it and a quality of sound. I'm not thinking, my single coil pickup is humming, buzzing so bad because of this light dimmer. The MIDI controller here, I pressed this, I'm trying to make a loop and I pressed it at the wrong time, and next thing you know, I'm on these are the kind of things that have stopped me from entering this world that I am going to start at this very late age. to really try and do the one-man band, but I want to do it in a good way that it's not karaoke where it's all pre-recorded on a backing track. It'll be done live with limited uses of that. But as I've looked now to be a content creator, no longer is the internal camera on your computer and mic and cut it. Now people they have good cameras, multiple angles, lighting. You have to be on top of your software. I was just looking up to how do you and the people that have the music notation, whether it's tab or standard notation, scrolling across the screen as they play in loops, and it's amazing what some of these teachers are doing. And so, you know, do I invest the money into Final Cut and and Logic Pro? You know, that's $500, and then a standard notation, and then learn the software, spend hours going through all the tutorials and everything to do. It's like, well, if I'm not going to do it now, it's probably never going to happen. So,
David, do you think there will ever be a moment in your life where your connection with the wood and the nylon is such an organic, craved feeling that has always been there? Do you think there will be a moment where you just shed all the extraneous electronics and not worry about and just you and the guitar? Do you think it would ever get to that point where suddenly the web of technology around you is so thick that you really just crave getting back to the natural, organic state of the musician and the instrument?
It had just happened a couple of years ago.
Okay.
It did, yes, because I have now an insane number of electric guitars and electric guitar equipment that has been untouched now for a long time. It's just sitting there.
I got to the acquisition syndrome for a while as well, and now I have a wall of guitars gathering dust. And I told someone recently, I walk into my office and I look at him and I can hear him saying, "Patrick, pick me up. When was the last time you played?" You know, they're literally like your children, you know, but you have your two guitars, and maybe and it's almost sad, like you almost want to get rid of them and give them to people that'll actually play them.
Well, I understand, and it's like you can only play one guitar at a time, and if you spread it out so much, then you end up, it's difficult. But the thing is, with like really good instruments, usually the budget is an issue. Like only like really wealthy people will have like some of these YouTubers I'll see, and they'll be like 50, 60. You know, and there'll be Stratocasters, Telecasters, Les Pauls, and everything, and a few $1,000s each.
Yeah,
you're talking about a lot of money tied up into it. Yeah. On the other hand, the pedals and the little devices, they're going to range anywhere from $100 to $400. Over 10 years, you can end up, since it's not that big a deal, you see this demo and listen to those sounds. So, you know, I have probably 10 different devices that can do a basic delay, different types of echoes, 10 different types of reverb. But then it's like, why not just have the best of each one, and the one that you like, and not bother with the rest? So
that makes sense. Sense.
Yeah. So
David, do you back to writing? Well, you're recording. Two-part question. Are you thinking about a future recording, doing it again? And do you have original compositions that you work on?
I'm going to start. I really am. And I know I've been procrastinating and saying that for many years, but I think that's really key is to just start creating. And I'd like to do something that's a little bit different than I've seen before, which is trying to merge classical guitar in a modern way. I think I had a hint of that with the album that I did, but a little bit but I want to do it in a good way. One of the most perfect examples, and again, I'm not. My weakness is probably jazz guitar. I haven't really spent a lot of time studying that compared to classical and rock and blues. But another name that I want to, if you haven't heard before, and I'm not sure the pronunciation, he's a French pianist named Jacques. Loussier.
Okay.
He plays piano, classical, in a jazz trio format, and you would be amazed. There's no guitar, unfortunately, but if I could do something like that with a bass player and a drummer, he does these arrangements, and they're really, really good. He does it he has a lot of Bach, and it'll be with a drummer and an upright bass. And Jacques Leger plays Bach. He did the Vivaldi, the Four Seasons, Baroque masterpieces, all sorts of stuff. Really,
I'm looking at his Spotify now. The Jacques Leger Trio.
yes,
and he's got the Well-Tempered Clavier. He's got Gymnopede. These are some of my favorite pieces. Thank you, and air and a G string.
Jazz trio. It's just unbelievable. But
wow, thank you. Great suggestion.
Sure.
And that's the direction you'd like to take your original compositions on your next recording.
I think so. Yes. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. How many original compositions do you have now that you have handwritten out, practice?
Here's to answer that.
How many?
Zero.
But you do have, when you sit down to play, do you have a regimented practice? Like, I'm going to work on my scales. I'm going to work on my modes. I'm going to work on my chords and my inversions. Or do you sit down and say, here's that little ditty that I was playing the other day. Let me expand on this.
Yeah, after all these years, I finally have buckled down. I do now. I have a repertoire, a few hours of classical guitar masterpieces, all standard tuning that I've been concentrating on for about 2 years now, ever since I bought my new guitar.
Okay.
And that's what I do. So that's always like ready to go. And because it's so easy for me to just get distracted. Oh, there's this new piece I heard. Let me try this. Let me do that. So yes, I do have a core amount, but I don't do a lot. A lot of classical players playing scales and arpeggios and with the metronome. I'm not knocking it or anything, but I've been playing for a few decades now. I'm not saying that technique is not important. If I was a concert player, walk down in a tuxedo, in the Carnegie Hall, yes, of course, those kind of players, they play 5-6 hours a day or a little, and they do those kind of regiments where their technique is flawless. So my technique's pretty good, but I'm more interested in the music and learning my technique in a musical way. In other words, I can make parts of the repertoire that I play a technique exercise by just concentrating on what's difficult and just taking slices of it, whether it's a portion of it or slowing it down.
David, I end every conversation on my podcast with the same question, whether it's guitar collectors, musicians, techs, repair guys, builders.
I think I know what's going to happen.
Okay. And such a diverse, I know your answer is just going to be loaded, and I'm looking forward to it. And I know it's putting you on the spot. It puts everyone on the spot. I had a guitar tech recently who said, I honestly would just pick 3 of my favorite drum tracks because I'm a drummer. I just happen to work on guitars. If you were to be stranded on a desert island, what 3 tunes would you put on your desert island mixtape and why?
Oh, that is really, really difficult. The 3, there probably some really long songs.
Okay.
No, I don't even know because what genre would I pick? I like so many different styles of music. So it'd probably be a Pat Metheny song, and I'm really bad with titles. So I don't. His titles, I don't know. I never remember what they're called.
And you're forgiven because he doesn't.
Wichita Falls or something like that, right?
Yes.
That might be one of the 3.
Very good choice.
Yeah, and it might be, in terms of blues, it might be Riviera Paradise by Stevie Ray Vaughan. Something like that might be one of them. His instrumentals are always that great jazzy blues.
And his tone on that song was just
exactly.
So that was him almost paying homage, again, tipping his hat to Jimi Hendrix. his tone on that was just so beautiful. That, in my opinion, I think that would have been his Little Wing.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah. And then as far as, and maybe it would be a classical, if it was a classical guitar piece, it would be maybe something like Sevilla by Isaac Albeniz. Would be Asturias, or sometimes called Leyenda. It was used in piece of it was kind of used in Spanish Caravan by the Doors.
Ding, 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 ding. Sure. Oh yeah. Robbie Krieger tipped his hat to the flamenco. Yes.
Krieger, yes, he's a great musician.
It's guys like it was tunes like Spanish Caravan, and I also I'd be remiss if I left out Brian May. That
and he's on YouTube and doing things, and he's just such an interesting person.
Fascinating, and such a balance of right and left brain.
Oh, absolutely! I mean,
phenomenal man. And I would be remiss if I left them out of the equation in my transition to jazz and classical music.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's certain guitar players, and I always think this is something to aspire to, is where you always know who's playing within a few seconds. Yes, there's some people that can imitate Pat Metheny very well, but for the most part, when it's him, right?
Yeah.
If you hear a rock solo and it's David Gilmour, you know it's him. Brian May, when he does the harmonies and the sound that he gets, it's you know him almost immediately.
Absolutely. Absolutely. David, I have to ask, do you find yourself working on your you treat your guitars with kid gloves, I'm sure, but do you find yourself having to take a tech approach and besides changing a string, adjusting a truss rod or oiling a fretboard, or
I find myself not really needing to do that. I have found and you probably would know more about this than me, because I know a lot of people will say, "Oh, the weather's changed a lot," and they'll and I feel go to the truss rod a little bit too quickly, as opposed. So, but yes, I am. I mean, yes, I will raise and lower the action. As far as I've never really needed to, in many years, have to deal with intonation, but yes, I have a little Peterson strobe tuner, and I know the basics. If I played lightly the 12th fret and do the 12th harmonic, then I have know which way to move it to lengthen or shorten the string length between. So yeah, I used to go to a place called the Guitar Factory in Orlando. And everyone in the Central Florida would go to them, and they would do modifications, repairs, and they would have a Saturday morning where you could just wait while they did stuff if it wasn't anything major. And it was very popular. There'd be a line of people there, and pictures of all sorts of celebrities. Who's the big slide guitar player that's local around Florida here?
Oh, you're not talking Derek Trucks?
Derek Trucks, yeah, he's
okay.
So you'll see his picture and people that don't come to mind, but yeah, a lot of Floridians that made it big. They know him, and
cool.
Yeah,
cool. Mm-hmm. Sad loss. I hate that the big boxes are still alive and well, relatively, and the small guitar shops like that are disappearing left and right. David, if anyone your website is still up and people can book you through your website?
I closed it down about 2 years ago. I just let it go because during the pandemic and everything, it was just like I hadn't put any fresh content or anything. So I want to try and really put out some quality content. But I honestly, since YouTube's been big and I've been just consuming it, I've been intimidated by thinking that how do I compete with these people? They really have put out so much great content. Do you follow Rick Beato's YouTube?
I do, and I was this close to meeting the guy when we lived in Atlanta.
Really?
My wife and I, we were visiting Manhattan years ago, I think 2018, 2019, and we went to see Ron Carter at the Blue Note. And
Wow.
I said, look, and I had to tell my wife, I said, look, we need to see Ron Carter. This guy is, and I gave her the whole Wikipedia of Ron Carter. And we're sitting literally from me to my laptop from the stage. And you know, those jazz clubs where 4 people share a little cocktail table. And the people that were sharing, the couple sharing the table with us, he said, yeah, I'm a horn player. I'm originally from upstate New York. Oh, cool. So you're really into jazz and da-da-da. And he said, have you ever heard of, I said, there's a guy in Atlanta. He's got a YouTube channel, Rick Beato. And he's like, oh, I went to college with Rick Beato. I went, no way. Really? What a small world. So my wife, he left when the show was over, he left his email address, and my wife emailed Rick Beato and asked him, look, for my husband's birthday, he loves your YouTube channel. It'd be cool if you guys could go out for a beer or something. This is before Rick was really that big.
Yes.
And I never heard from the guy. He never responded. And I completely get it. And I do not fault him for that.
I mean, that's so huge. If I could do 1%, because I feel I'd be ridiculous to say I want to do what he does. Yeah, me and a million other people that play guitar and are into music. I mean,
well, there you go.
Full of it. And he's got close to 4 million subscribers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I have to tell you, David, do not get discouraged, because when I wanted to start this podcast, I went and researched guitar podcasts, and there are a bunch of them. And I said, you know what? There's a reason there's a bunch of them, because those are the people that decided, oh, even if I see one guitar podcast, I'm not going to do it because someone's already doing it. Do not. YouTube is full of content, and you're going to get followers.
I hope so.
Yeah.
But you're right, because now, like you said, you can find anything in YouTube. There's people now providing content of how to provide content. So I'm overwhelmed. I was like, how do I do this? Well, look it up on YouTube. How do you provide content? How do you do this stuff? And it's all there for the taking. It's just a matter of applying. And like you said, I mean, Rick Beato's really out there. He tells like it is, and he started with very little, and it was quite amateurish, but yeah, I mean, obviously he knows music very well. And that's why I asked you a few questions and you responded, well, I'm interviewing you, not the other way, because that's something, because his interviews are amazing. I mean, he's got Joni Mitchell, Pat Metheny, recently Brad Mehldau. I didn't even talk about him.
Oh, phenomenal.
Yes. And Steely Dan, the drummers, Birdie, and that's what I think sets him apart, is he knows music and he can relate to it. It's not just a one-way path. He actually knows what they're talking about. So I think that's what's good about us, likewise, is that you're not just somebody just asking me questions. You can relate to it. So
it's a back and forth conversation. Absolutely. And Rick, when he first started, kind of had a fanboy approach, like, remember that time you were in the studio and you recorded, what was that like playing with, Jaco Pastorius, and so every so often he'll tip his toe into the fanboy thing.
And authentic, because it is relatable. Yes. He's a fan like us, and he's not ashamed to say it. He is. He's shocked. Absolutely. I mean, you said the idea that you would ever be sitting right in the same room with Pat or Joni Mitchell or any of these people was incomprehensible to him. So
yeah. And then I actually recently read that his interview with Sting, which you've probably seen, Sting actually contacted Rick and said, hey, I'd like you to interview me. And for a guy like Sting to do that, that's a testament for sure.
A couple of days ago, he just came out with a video and was talking about the channel so far. And he talked about how hard it is to get some of these, that it took him 4.5 years to get Pat. He'd been trying.
Wow.
So a lot of these, like Brian May, obviously isn't just going to show up something. He's looked at it. He saw his analysis of Bohemian Rhapsody or something. And I still want to know, and I don't know if you know this, because the interview is a big thing now, but in the past we had lots of things about music theory and what makes the song great. So he's got these little nice marketing things that helps in that, and having the thumbnail and the title is huge, right? You could have great content if you don't know like the key words and the titles and the thumbnail image and all that kind of stuff. That's a huge part of it. Mm-hmm. So he had said that it took, but before that, he had done What Makes a Song Great, and he has access to all the individual stems.
Amazing.
Find them or get them. How does he get?
That's
Isolating tracks. There's an amazing amount of stuff on YouTube with just, you can find just the bass and the drums without guitar.
Mm-hmm.
And I downloaded it. I said, this is amazing. How did it happen? How did they get it?
Yeah. And how Rick has access to that is beyond me. And now that you've mentioned that, I feel bad for him that there are so many great musicians out there that are still alive. The legacy, classic rock, Jimmy Page, Jeff Beck, Tony Iommi with Black Sabbath. All of these guys need to be interviewed by Rick, and he'll never have that chance because he's not allowed, or even do what makes this song great about the Beatles or the Rolling Stones, because he'll get canned on YouTube.
I know, it's just we didn't even delve into this, but the whole business, the music industry, whether it's performing, recordings, teaching, and everything, is copyright now.
Yeah.
And right now, people can steal other people's work. I mean, all the die, right? Let's listen to Smells Like Teen Spirit as if it was sung by Frank Sinatra. So like the cast of The Family Guy doing Bohemian Rhapsody.
Yeah.
Funny.
David, you might like, and this blows my mind. I follow this lady. She's a classical harpist on YouTube, and the name of her channel is Virgin Rock.
Virgin what?
Virgin Rock, ROCK. And she's a classical harpist, and her husband is a guitarist, and he gives her songs to sit through. She sits through a bunch of Pink Floyd tunes, and she gives a trained classical musician's view. And she recently posted Voodoo Child by Jimi Hendrix, and I'm blown away that the video is still up, because that's one of those videos that would get taken down.
Yeah, Beatles, Led Zeppelin, Eagles, Hotel California. I mean, you think that's, hundreds and hundreds of people, guitarists, that put things on and it gets removed. And yes, exactly. And I remember Rick Beato, he even went to Congress and he had something about the blocking. So there's got to be, I don't know, answer to this. Yeah,
and he has, and Rick even did a video when he went to Congress, a follow-up, and he said, these musicians are going to disappear. The generations nowadays that rely on YouTube and the internet for their music are not going to be able to see or hear guys like Jimi Hendrix and guys like the Rolling Stones,
right.
Because it's truly tragically sad.
Yes.
As soon as the families of the estates of those passed on greats learn that, hey, if we want to keep making revenue off of our estate, Jimi Hendrix's name, John Lennon's name, we're going to have to open up their coffers, allow their content to get shared.
I don't like to steal things. I want musicians to get credit and everything. On the other hand, you don't pay for things you can get for free. It's just psychologically, you can't really. No one's going to do that. I'm not. So, when you go to concerts these days, not necessarily, not Pat Metheny or people like that, but like regular pop concerts and everything, you notice that every kid is holding up a cell phone.
Yeah.
What do they do with that footage? Nothing. Do they ever watch it again? Or they get posted on YouTube and you hear some really horrible, and somebody's hand getting in the way, when you can find professionally shot and corners. What is that? Everybody has to take video on their phones all the time, and they're not in the moment at all. It used to be hilarious because in the older days, I remember even seeing people with iPads holding up, and I was sitting behind somebody with an iPad raised up to footage.
Those are the people that you throw candy at and stuff like that and hit the back of their head with the goobers and the Raisinets.
Right, that used to be a big thing, whether you can stand up or sit down at concerts and everything.
Right. David, I don't want to take up any more of your time, but I love your idea of a part 2. And we can talk about gear and dive into gear.
Topics, yeah. So I'll come up with an outline. All right.
That would be awesome. So, David, if someone were to book you, then are you still available for booking?
I'm available, yes.
how would they find you?
That's a good question.
Yeah. I
Right
think
now-
I found you on a local musicians directory, and I don't remember the website because it's been 10 years, but I found you on a local musicians will play weddings, da 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 da.
I think it was called Gig Salad. So I have to
Yes.
install that. That's going to be in the next few months. That's exactly what I'm going to do. I'm going to revamp, get back, and I'm going to get a YouTube channel going. It's not going to happen overnight, though. So I guess you have to hold on for a little bit. But right now,
David, can I share your email address on my information for the podcast, and people can contact you through the email?
it would be David, Naidu at att.net.
David Naidu at att.net.
That's it.
David, thank you again for your time. I appreciate it. And I look forward to our next conversation. Thank you so much, my friend, and you take good care of yourself.
All right, you too.